Welcome to American Stories. I'm host Charles Shepard from Fort Wayne Museum of Art. With me today in the studio, I have artist Robert Kipniss. It's a delight to have you here. Your exhibition is the largest exhibition, solo exhibition, the museum's ever had. We've never devoted 3 galleries to one artist, and I'm so delighted we did. And I think the public's delighted that we did.
Thank you.
And I just want to ask you a few questions because I know you have some very wonderful behind-the-scenes story, and that's what we're all about here. When you started out, you went to art school.
No.
No.
No, I went to school to study literature. I painted and I drew all my life, but I didn't want to study it. I just wanted to do it, and I wanted to be educated. And I felt that being educated meant knowing the history of the culture, and studying literature would be the best way for me to get that. I was 17 years old. That was my view of things. And then I got expelled from Wittenberg University, and I went to Iowa, and when I registered, the fellow, what do you call it, guy?
The dean?
No, an advisor was talking to me about and showed me the catalog, and I took, I enrolled in a number of really exciting literature courses, and he said, well, you've got a lot of literature, and he handed me this big, thick catalog. University of Iowa has a catalog like that. He says, pick something outside the... Well,
to broaden your horizon.
So it was alphabetical. Accounting, no. Art, well, yeah, art.
Okay. Art.
And I said, you mean I can take an art course and get credit? He said, sure. I said, well, fine, that's wonderful. And he said, that's terrific. Love to see you branch out like that. I was doing it anyway. So I went to class, and everybody's in there, and it's a big studio and easels, and I bought a lot of masonite because that's very inexpensive, and I couldn't afford canvas. And I started painting. And I started painting. Oh, it was very exciting, painting with both hands and all this. And I'm painting a lot of paintings, and they're starting to stack up. And the professor came around one day, and he had been observing me, and he said, that's very interesting, Kipniss, let me show you something. He picked up my brush, and he started to reach for my canvas, and I reached out, grabbed his wrist, and he was in his 40s, and I was 17. Oh, I was 19 at that time. I could feel his little bones creaking. And he looked at me, and I just whispered. I said, tell me anything you want, but don't touch my work. His eyes got very big, and he put down the brush, and he walked away. He didn't talk to me for about, several weeks, maybe longer.
He got your point.
But he came around to me, and he said, I can see you're pretty serious about this. I didn't know if I was serious or not. I was having a good time. And he said, he gave me a key to the building. He said, you come in here and paint nights, weekends, whenever you want. You make progress.
Carte blanche.
Carte blanche. He says, you do what you want. If you show me that you're making progress, you'll do fine. If you don't, then you'll either listen to me or leave the class. I didn't care what he said, so everything worked out okay until 3 graduate students came around. I was a junior, and they said to me, that's a lot of paintings there, Kipniss. Everybody painted 1 or 2 paintings a year, which I couldn't understand. I mean, they were such gentlemen about being artists. I mean, get in there and do it. So I said, they said, what are you going to do with all those paintings? At that time, I had about 120 paintings.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, all on canvas, on masonite, stacked up against the wall. And I said, well, I'm going to have a show in New York. They looked at me like I was nuts and walked away. And I kept saying to myself, why did I say that? Why did I say that? What was the point? So I went to the art library downstairs. I looked at magazines from the city, and this is in Iowa City, magazines from New York City, and I found, galleries. I made note. I thought Easter I'd bring a few paintings with me and see what I could scare up. I use that phrase in my mind. See what I could scare up. Maybe I can get into a group show or a painting on a wall.
In New York City.
In New York
and
City.
Here you are in Iowa.
In Iowa. So I looked at, I saw an ad for a competition for a one-man show, which I entered, and I came in second. But they liked my work so much they gave me a one-man show also. Now I'm 19 years old, 20 years old now, and I'm having the show, and the summer comes, and the show is in September, and I get the announcement, nice announcement, and I go back to school, and the art bulletin board is empty now because it's the beginning of the semester, and I put it right in the middle. I pin it right in the middle. Nobody ever talked to me again. Nobody in that, nobody. I mean, the professors were irritated because they couldn't get shows.
Get a show?
This is on 57th Street, the heart of the entire art.
Yeah, still.
Well, yeah, just about.
Yeah.
So that was pretty neat.
That's exciting.
It was very exciting. And I had another show 2 years later on 57th Street, another gallery, better gallery.
Better gallery, okay.
Better reviews. But it was happening. I was starting. I was launched.
Now, at this juncture, let me ask a very important question that I get from art students all the time. They speculate frequently before you graduate. They speculate that, in fact, if I could only get a New York show, that would be the bullet for my career. You know, I've made it. I'm there. And yet, what did it feel like? You got the New York show, then you got another New York show.
I was nowheres.
Okay.
I felt I was nowhere.
It wasn't a silver bullet.
No, no. In fact, getting another show took me 6 years. It was very, very difficult because, for a number of reasons. Because, number one, the art world was in the grip of abstract expressionism, and it was a stranglehold. Yeah. Almost every review began with so-and-so having a show at such and such a gallery, former student of Hans Hofmann. Everybody was a former student of Hans Hofmann, except me, probably a lot of other people. But it was very difficult. And, you know, I went every 6 months to a couple hundred galleries, took 2 weeks off with small paintings under my arm, just go around. And I'd walk into a gallery. It was common for artists to send in slides. But I said, you know, secretary's going to open it up and throw them in the trash or whatever. So I went around with the paintings in the mornings, because that's when they're not busy, and I'd make sure they weren't busy with anything in particular. And I'd walk in and say to the director, I'd like to show you some paintings. And he would say, no. And I'd put them against the wall.
Anyway.
Do it. And what do you do when you see paintings? You look at them. They look and they say, oh, no, 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 no. And that went on for 6 years, until one said, I'd like you to leave them here. And then I came back, when he told me to come back, to pick them up. He says, you can come pick them up now. So I came to pick them up. I was disheartened. And he said, no, no, not all of them. I'm buying 3 of them. This is fabulous.
Perfect.
Big gallery, Madison Avenue, 77th Street, right on the corner. World famous, nice, wonderful gallery. And I had 2 shows there. It was very good. I was relaunched, but really.
Well, and re-energized after 6 years of pretty intensive try, and reject.
Well, it was very intense, but I'm an artist, and that's what I was going to do. And it didn't matter to me if I did well or I didn't do well. This is what I'm going to do. I wrote a memoir many years later, 50 years later, and the last line of it was, I have lived my life as I dreamed of doing as a young man. You know, I was doing what I needed to do, and I didn't feel like I was making any sacrifices. It was enjoyable. It was good. It was hard, but it was fine.
It's what you elected to do, and you were going to stick with it.
Nobody told me to do it. Nobody. Everyone told me not to do it. But it was nice. It was good.
Well, and that's in stark contrast, I think, to, let's say, not just people in art schools today, but even over the last 20 years, there's sort of an expectation of, starting with the boomer generation, of, I'm going to do it unless it's painful. And if it's painful, I might give this up. And I suppose to the people that don't give it up, that's a blessing because you get out of the way. And then the serious people keep going.
There's an old show business expression which I think fits this very well. If anything can stop you, let it. That's the whole story.
It really applies.
Isn't that
it
wonderful?
Really applies, doesn't it? It is wonderful.
You know, if anything can stop you, let it. Because this has to be something that you just need to do regardless of what happens.
Well, it enables you to get up and get to work every day. Because you're not deciding to go to work. You've already decided to go to work.
I didn't need any incentive for that.
And were those three that gallery purchased, were those the first purchases? Or did people purchase out of other shows?
No, the other shows sold 4, 5, 6 paintings each.
Well, that's very nice then.
Paintings were very cheap. And even at this gallery, while I was making a living, when we started to have children with my first wife, my sales prices weren't high enough to support us, so I got evening work. First I was the night manager of a bookstore, and then I worked nights in the post office for a while. It was several years.
Which would leave your days free to be in the studio.
I had the days free when I was fresh to do paintings. When I was a little tired and cranky, I went to work.
That's probably the perfect trade-off. You know, it's what Charles Bukowski, the novelist, did.
Oh yes, I read about him.
All his good energy in the daytime went to the writing.
Right.
And at night, as you say, okay, they need my second energy.
That's right, leftover energy.
And just out of curiosity, how long did you do that?
It ended around 64, and
okay.
I started getting part-time work in 59. So it was about 4 years between the two jobs. 3 years in the post office, 1 year at the...
well, and one of the changes would be, I think, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but the art world in 1959, 1958, in 1964 and 5, starting to get different, starting to move away from the stranglehold.
59.
Did it?
What you had was the onset of pop art, and that broke the log jam. I wasn't a pop artist, but
at least it broke the log jam.
There was room for everything. And the gallery that I first started, that I really had a good break with, the Contemporaries, they showed all kinds of art. They had op art, they had, I don't know if they had pop, but they had all kinds of, they had abstractions, they had realist art. They had some very nice artists.
And realism has, in whatever way you define it, it has struggled for the longest time for legitimacy, despite the fact that hundreds of years of art history, it's all that there was. So we rebelled, I guess.
Well, the masters were not realists. I mean, they representation, but their brushwork was loose and exciting and juicy. And
had emotion, yeah.
It had a lot of stuff in it. You know, these magic realists or, you know, picky realists, you know, that's a different kind of art. That's something else. And there's the room for everything, I guess.
It's a more cold-hearted way of doing things. And I think of that kind of realism, a photorealism, a magic realism, as a real far cry from what you do. Yours is so full of warmth and emotion and passion.
It wasn't always. It was very surreal, very cold, very eerie for a while.
Really?
Yes, it was. And one of the things that's hard for an artist to understand is that a dealer who shows your work has to pay rent. He's got to pay staff. He's got to pay electricity. He's got to pay telephone. He's got to pay printing. He's got to pay
all those things.
Advertising, a huge number of things. If he doesn't sell your work, he can't stay open. And a lot of artists say, well, they're just looking for work to sell, but if he doesn't sell, he can't stay open. And it's a very, and you really can't think about selling when you're painting. It never occurs to me, nor afterwards. Yeah. I mean, I show it to a dealer. If he can do it, fine. If he can't, I'll find somebody else. Yeah. But you can't think about that because, well,
then you're not thinking about painting, I would imagine.
I put it to myself like this. If you're going to try and understand the market and paint for the market, and you fail, you will have failed for something you are not. You might as well fail for who you are if you're going to fail.
If you're going to fail anyway. Yeah.
Go for it. No, just do what you feel, what you need, what you want to do. And if people like it, fine. If they don't, well, that's okay too, because you're doing what you need to do. Don't do anything else, ever.
And in '64 then, you began to feel that you had the situation, the strength to break away from part-time work and do what you needed to do.
No, I didn't feel that. The public told me that.
Ah.
They started buying my work. A lot. A lot. I really started selling it. It surprised me, but it was nice. I liked it.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
It was very nice, and I started, and my career went zoomed straight up. I began to find other dealers, and you know, it just was very good. And then in '67, I had a dealer on Madison Avenue, a wonderful man, very fatherly figure to me. And he said, you really have to make prints. I said, I don't like prints, I don't want to make prints. He said, I just got you a commission for 5 editions. You have to.
You have to make the prints.
And I loved it. It was wonderful.
Had you made any before?
Never. And when I was in school and I saw the print department, I just thought it was dumb. Dumb.
Fascinating.
Dumb.
And you taught yourself to make the prints?
I took a 6 weeks course at Pratt Graphic Center,
okay,
where I learned to make etchings. And so then I bought a small press and I made some etchings, some dry points.
Wow. And
I showed them to the dealer and he said, oh, these are wonderful, but this isn't what I meant. I want you to make lithographs.
Oh.
So he sent me to a lithographic workshop. I said, I don't know anything about lithographs. He said, watch for 20 minutes the way they do it and you'll pick it right up. And I
That's
did,
amazing.
And I did. And I did. And I made lithographs, editions, and it was amazing. It was amazing.
Well, in this exhibition, we have drawings and prints along with your paintings. And I have to tell you, printmakers who've been nosing around are stunned at your prints. And I think you're going to stun them even further when they learn that you picked up etching in a 6-week course and 20 minutes in a litho shop.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
You have a faculty for it.
Well, the dealer said to me, you'll be a natural. And he was perfectly right. I took to it very quickly. And the big advantage in making prints is that you can have a lot of dealers all over the country. All of a sudden I had dealers all over the country selling my work. And you can have a show. You can have shows. I would have a show with 20 prints and 4 or 5 paintings. And that would be a nice show in a small town, in a small gallery. Perfect. And you know, life was good.
Yeah,
museums were buying my work, which was really nice.
Really good.
And
well, and that tends to leverage buyers, collectors especially.
It's a lot of validation there.
Yeah.
It was very nice. Yeah, it was very nice. Of course, a show like this I've never had a show like this. I've had a lot of big shows in museums. I had a show that reopened the New Orleans Museum of Art after Katrina, 6 months after Katrina. And they had 35 paintings and 86 prints, which is nothing compared to what you have here. 102 paintings, my goodness.
So a lot of beautiful paintings and a lot of beautiful prints.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. You did. Well, you really did something good here.
I think back to the days in the studio when we were talking about the show and looking at the body of work. You would show me something, and I couldn't say no. And you'd show me something again.
You wanted everything.
And I did. I confess, I did want everything.
You wanted everything.
It just struck me that each piece, and you addressed this in something you wrote some years ago, that if you pay attention, each piece is so different from the other one.
They are.
That's why I couldn't say no.
Well, you noticed it right away. You saw. I mean, some people will say, "Oh, well, trees, houses," you know. But no, that's not what they're about.
I was going to say, I never thought they're about trees.
No.
The tree might have a shape that appears, but there's all so much else going on.
It's the vocabulary.
Yes.
Not the message.
Well, and that's why I think we had to have so many, because we wanted to take the vocabulary and make the exhibit your language.
It really is. It really was. And then you have that room of the early paintings. There's so many stories in that room and so many memories.
Oh, I'll bet there
Nice
are.
room.
There,
Yeah.
it's a marvelous way to show those early paintings slightly separate from today's
I'm
paintings.
thrilled by that. You have paintings there from 1951.
51, when we're back struggling with this abstract
My first
expression,
show.
stranglehold.
My first show.
Your first show.
1951.
It takes my breath away to think of it that way.
That's very nice.
And I'm sure that as you look at that work on the wall, you remember the struggles of 1951
Well,
and
some of those
prior to
paintings,
64.
yes.
Yeah.
Some of those paintings were painted while I was wearing a sweater, a hat, scarf, and gloves, because we had no heat or hot water. I mean, those paintings
In
were
your
not-
apartment.
That's right.
That-
The ones from 54 and 55 and 56 were all painted under a great deal of stress.
And by looking at them, you never guessed that.
No, of course not.
The
That's not the part of me that paints. The
very
part
good
of me
point.
that paints is, I don't know where,
Somewhere else. Somewhere else.
deep inside.
You told me that day in the studio something that I had not figured out on my own about the way you paint. You were talking about how I noticed that the line around a form, a leaf, a branch, has an electricity, a softness, and you said, oh, because I paint in. I'm not saying it right. Tell me how you paint, because I've never known anybody that paints that way, but that's how you get that beautiful edge.
I put a coat of paint on every canvas before I work on it, and I let it dry. It might have a little bit of red in it, a little bit of yellow in it, but mostly a little bit of blue or a little bit of green. And that dries. And then I work over that with the dark paint, painting the solid objects, composing. And then when that dries, and while that's drying, I'll work on something else, of course. And when that dries, then I'll go to the canvas and put paint in the lightest areas. And I paint them around the objects that I've drawn. In doing this, I'm redefining the objects, but I'm also creating the spaces between them as objects.
As objects.
As spaces, as shapes on their own, with their own meaning. And then I'll go back to when that dries, I'll go back and recompose the solid parts. And then that'll dry, I'll recompose the lighter parts. And of course, it starts getting the in-between colors and the medium tones. And you get this tension of everything fitting together. But around each one is a little bit of the color from the very first underpainting. That little bit of blue, that little bit of green, that little bit of yellow. Very moderate, very modest, but it creates a sparkle.
It does, and it also means that your negative space is just as exciting and interesting as your positive space.
Absolutely. Just as composed, just as considered, just as thoughtful, just as important. Every millimeter is important.
And do you approach the prints in the same manner?
No, because I can only do, you can't make,
The process isn't going to work
you
that way.
can't make the negative shape. You can't create the negative shape except with a burnisher. Maybe with the mezzotints I can do some of that, but that's a little bit different. I don't know exactly.
Let's stop on the mezzotints just for a minute, because you have the richest blacks, dark spaces in those mezzotints. They're delicious.
It's the nature of the medium. It really is. What you're doing is you're starting out with a plate that will print solid black. You ink it, wipe all the ink off, but it's so filled with hundreds of thousands of little pinholes that each little pinhole will hold enough ink that that plate will print solid
black.
velvety black. And then you take a steel burnisher, which is much harder than the copper, and you burnish away those holes that hold the ink. So you're drawing the light. You're not drawing the objects. The objects are what you leave behind. So I suppose, in a way, that's the way I do the paintings when I compose the negative spaces, because in doing mezzotints, you're always drawing the negative space. You don't draw the positive space is what you leave.
It's what you leave there.
Of course,
Yeah.
with gradations, of course.
So it is akin to the painting process.
It is,
which is
much more so than I would have thought at first.
And when you're in the studio, how do you marshal your time for painting versus printmaking?
I have two studios.
Okay.
One for one and one for the other. And when I'm in the one painting, all I do is paint. That's in Westchester. The other studio is in Connecticut. When I'm in Connecticut, I work on copper plates. When I'm in Westchester, I work on canvas.
Well, that's lovely, because then the focus
Only
in
one.
each place
There's no
is
division.
simply-
There's no possibility for division, because everything is kept very separate. And I immerse myself in whichever one I'm near.
Oh, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Now, you're in the studio virtually every day then?
Every day, 7 days a week. But my days are shorter now than they used to be. I used to start working very early. Now I start the day with 40 or so minutes in the gym, and then I, shower, come back, and settle in. I get to my studio around 9:45, and I finish around 6:30, 6:30.
That's still a pretty hefty day.
No, it's a short day.
Compared to maybe 1951.
I used to put in long days, yeah. I used to put in long days. But I guess that's good. I joke with my wife, because she's a writer and she only works 4 hours a day. I said, well, another half day at the office, right? But I know she works very hard, and she does research.
She works very hard in those hours.
And
yes.
those hours
Yes.
are very intense. And but it's very good. I do focus very well. I always have. I close the door to my studio, the world is gone. But one of the interesting things that happened to me somewheres in the 60s, I think, I started realizing that when I worked on a painting, it didn't seem like a two-dimensional surface anymore. As I worked, I was entering space. I was entering a different world, a world that, well, I sort of had an idea of. And as I changed shapes and everything, it became three-dimensional, and I entered into it. And it was a jolt to come back out and realize I'm looking at a picture.
It's
a picture.
After all, yes.
Yeah, it's a picture.
Let me take you back to the topic we started with, is literature first, then art. And I want to go back to that because you have a beautiful book out that combines your poetry, which is very, very good,
thank you.
with your art. And there aren't many artists who could do it at all,
There have been
or who
some.
have done it.
There have been
a
some.
few,
Yeah,
a few. But it's elegant, and it's an elegant pairing. And you mentioned to me at one point in time that it was sort of a dark pairing too.
Very, very. My early paintings were exuberant, colorful, lively, just painted like. And my poetry was dark, painful, difficult, very dark. And when I started working at the post office, I had to give one up because I didn't have time for both. And I was exhibiting and selling some and helping support my family. And I had never published any of the poetry. I don't know why. It never occurred to me why I didn't publish. I didn't publish because I didn't submit anywhere. I never showed anybody anything. Once, when I was 19, I took a manuscript to a publisher. And I got a lot of encouragement, but it didn't happen. And now, what is it? How many years later? 63, many years later. So I stopped writing, and I focused on painting, and sorting mail at night. And like that, the paintings turned dark. These exuberant, colorful paintings turned dark. All the darkness that was going into the poems.
Poetry came over into the paintings.
And you can look in that book of poetry, from one page to the next, the paintings get so black, so dark.
They are.
But people liked them. The critics liked them. Collectors who were collecting my work turned away from them, but I got new collectors. It was very interesting. And then, after about 2 years or 3, my innate lyricism and optimism started to creep back into the paintings, so that you had a combination of the gravitas, the darkness, the difficulty, the seriousness, and the beauty, and the light, and the shape, and the air. And this was the beginning of my mature style, and my career took off like a rocket. It just, as soon as that happened, there was no, people came in and bought them. And they came to the galleries and bought them.
That balance captivated everyone.
It just seemed to captivate everyone. And I remember the dealer being so delighted. I'd come to him with a new painting, and he'd say, "Oh, I can sell that today." And he took it and he had a window on Madison, 2 windows on Madison Avenue and 65th Street. And he hung it in the window, and I left the gallery, and he called me. When I got home, there was a message. He had sold the painting.
Sold the painting. He was right. He's going to sell it that day.
20 minutes, he said. It took 20 minutes.
Well, you and I walking down the street in the city on our way to the old print shop.
Yes.
You recall we paused, and there was your work right in the window, as you say.
It was nice. Yeah.
It was lovely.
It was nice, yeah.
And we were surprising them, so they were trying to work on your behalf.
Oh, I know
then.
that.
Yeah.
They've been there 114 years in the same family.
Yes, quite remarkable.
It's a remarkable gallery, and the people there are remarkable, and the owner is an absolutely wonderful man, and he likes he believes in what I'm doing, and he works for me. He does that.
Well, and that day, as we talked with him, it was so apparent that he believed in what you're doing. Yeah. You know, I recall we had 2 assistants helping us look through things, yeah. And he couldn't stay away, and he couldn't stop telling stories.
That's right.
And I think you've had that effect on a number of gallery owners, though, I think.
I've had a lot of good fortune in that respect. The first one was problematic. I mean, the one in 1959. It was difficult, and he had a lot of problems with the owner, because the owner was a very, very wealthy man, and was using, he was a builder and a designer and an architect, and he was using the gallery as sort of a shell for amassing one of the finest collections of old master drawings in the world. His name was Woodner. And it put a lot of pressure on the owner, on the director of the gallery, because there were never any funds to pay the artist or the rent or the electricity.
Going to the collection.
He was taking it.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was a lot of pressure and tension in the gallery. But after that, I had a lot of good fortune, a lot of good fortune.
Well, and the gallerists, that, of course I didn't know that gallerist, but gallerists that I've known in my career from the 80s, when your name comes up, well actually, gallerists when your name comes up light up.
That's
and
nice.
Other artists, which I think is quite nice.
Okay.
You know, John Bader, who's also having an exhibition with us.
It's a nice show.
He said, "I hear Kipniss has a bigger show." I said, "He does." He said, "He's a good man." And Philip Koch sent me an email yesterday from Massachusetts saying, "How lovely to have Robert Kipniss's show." He said, "I'm going to make a point to travel out to see it." And you don't often get other artists giving you a pat on the back like that.
I didn't know that.
And, no, it's absolutely true. I mean, it's lovely.
That's very nice.
Lovely to get
yeah.
it. And I expect we'll get more.
I hope so. That's nice.
Now, this is a big show. It's a very meaningful show. But you told me just yesterday that you mentioned, remember, I'm a living artist, and you've got more shows coming and more art to make. Is that right? You have a show coming right around the corner.
Yeah, yeah. I do have shows. I like that. It's very good. This is the biggest show I've ever had. But I have had 5 shows, one-man shows in museums this month.
Oh, that's quite amazing.
So it happens.
That's quite amazing.
Yeah,
Well, Robert, I have to tell you how proud we are to have your work in our collection, in our archives, to have this show here now.
Thank you.
And I'm so appreciative of you taking time out of your schedule to talk with us on the program today.
It's an honor. It's an honor to be here. And what you've done is wonderful, and I'm very appreciative.
Thank you. I'm so appreciative that you're here.
Well, thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.